Yes. Welcome to Greg Fasolino's interview with Reed Waller, creator of Omaha the Cat Dancer.
On the other phone? Oh, okay. Oh, okay.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
Yes. This is Kate.
Hey Kate, how you doing? I'm Greg.
Oh, glad to meet you via the magic of telephone.
Yes. I don't know, I hadn't spoken with you before. I sent you guys a letter a while ago. I'm from Reflex magazine, and we wanted to do a feature on you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we got the letter, and of course, with our infinite talent for correspondence, I haven't gotten back to you yet.
Before I get into the actual interview, I just wanted to ask something for myself. I was just curious how Omaha 15 was coming along.
Oh, it's coming along. It should be getting finished up in the next week or two.
Well, that's good.
And getting out, barring any more major catastrophes. Every time things seem to start going, something happens.
Right.
And I hope we're through with those for the year.
I read in the letters column that you had a bunch of problems with this accident you had, stuff like that. Is that is that better now?
Started getting actual medical treatment back in March.
Oh, thank God.
Finally, but messing around with a bunch of idiots for about a year and a half really just about did me in.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, they really just thought I should throw up this stressful life and become a CPA or something.
Do you guys actually do you have day jobs, or do you live off Omaha at this point?
Well, I also had a day job until March.
Ah.
I've only been loose since then. And then we had a couple of family crises in May of various sorts. Of unvarious sorts. We both had deaths in the family, and they chewed things up too. So.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, but as those kind of things do, but things, and since then it's the start of the convention season, and then things get crazy. I'm hoping next year we can really get way ahead so that we don't have to work in the summer at all.
That would be nice. Because
the conventions just really, you come home, you think, well, I'll get one good night's sleep and I'll be fine, and it doesn't work that way.
Yeah, you probably want to just sleep for a week.
Well, after the Chicago convention, we came home and we both came down with some roaring virus, and we're dog sick for like 2 weeks.
She had to haul me to the emergency room after a week.
Oh my God.
So it's been a lot.
I guess the first thing I would want to ask is, how do you view your work as documenting real life as opposed to just, something that's pure imagination or, fantasy or whatever? Because, that's, I think, for myself, and I know, just from reading your letters column and other people I know who like it, above anything else, I think something that people really latch onto with Omaha is the fact that it's such realism, and they can really identify with the characters and stuff like that. Is that your intention?
Yeah, I think so. I find her stories quite realistic. A lot of people think of them as kind of exotic, and the way this group of friends interacts as being unusual, but it isn't to us. I mean, that to me looks just like the way our friends and we and other people we know interact. Anytime you get a group of people who are on close terms, things get complicated. I'm just kind of sitting back here reporting to a degree. Not that we've lifted, many situations directly from real life. Actually, it's just kind of how we think people real people would behave in these kinds of situations.
So would you say it's less purely like autobiographical or stories about people you know? It's more like taking specific, like just certain things you've seen and interpolating it and making new situations out of that?
Yeah, essentially there's nothing in there that's autobiographical, to any degree at all, except the way relationships work.
Right.
We've got the whole stage setting that Reed set up in Bizarre Sex 9, and it's just kind of all taken from there, but it's the part of it that is realistic is based on there's some minor things that are very real. Shelley gets a lot of them. The bit about the shelf in the bookstore being too high
Right.
for a handicapped person to reach did in fact happen. I knew a woman who worked at that bookstore, and little bits like that are dead true. But the general story is fabrication, or is it, Reed?
Well, yeah, it's fabrication. A lot of the main characters are owe a certain amount to people that we know,
Mm-hmm.
or have met, or have been related to. But for the most part, if any character in particular is part invention and part composite of like several people that we've known.
Hmm. I was curious about one character because I noticed in one of the books you thanked somebody named Huddle,
Mm-hmm.
and I just that made me curious as if these were real people, or if it was more like you're saying, just like composites.
Yeah, Huddle is actually based to a degree on a real person as far as physiological type and the role he was originally cast in. We were coming up with a character for that part anyway. The interesting thing about that was that a lot of things we included about him turned out to be true that we didn't know about that person.
Right.
Which was kind of interesting that we'd done that somehow without realizing. But no, by and large, certain of them certainly are archetypes. Actually, some of the more fantastic characters turn out to be some of the most realistic.
Mm-hmm.
Charlie, to a degree, has a basis in fact.
Joanne seems very real to me.
Hmm?
Joanne seems very real to me, which she didn't in the beginning, but after a while.
Yeah, I don't know. She's grown on me. Actually, I kind of fell into writing the book because I didn't like her.
Really?
And we got into a discussion one night about why I didn't like her. About a year before I actually took up writing the book. And it wasn't something I could put my finger on, but now that I know her better, now that I have some idea of where she's coming from, I like her a lot better.
You also, something that you said that struck me interesting is that you've said that Omaha is a soap opera.
Mm-hmm.
Like how do you look at that? I mean, is that something you looking at as a positive sense? I would imagine then.
Well, I suppose we could have simply used the term serial, which is what they
Mhm.
were called before they were called soap operas. I mean, I don't see anything wrong with writing serials.
I don't think it's positive or negative. I think it's just a way of typing what you're doing. It's got continuing characters. It's got and it's about their day-to-day life and their relationships. And there is somebody in it that's really rich.
Mm-hmm.
That's a requirement for any soap opera.
Would you I mean, to me, Omaha really stands apart from almost any other comic that I know of out there. I mean, would you compare it to anything else, or do you look at it as something really discrete and unique to you?
I've never seen anything else come up that's quite like it. I mean, right now there's a lot of books with explicit sexual material in them, And again, they don't seem to bear any relationship to ours. There are a lot of straight storytelling out there that doesn't seem to bear any relationship to ours.
The one thing I can think of that resembles what we're doing at all is Martin Wagner's Hepcats.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, it's fairly new. And again, using funny animals in handling, the real life situations. Very good.
It's a general audience book, but in the sense of being a funny animal soap opera.
Right. Well, now that you mentioned that, that was bringing up another question I had. For a lot of people who aren't familiar with the comic, like if you try to turn them on to it, like the first thing a lot of times they ask is, why the funny animals? And so I guess just for people like who would be reading this who wouldn't, aren't, already fans, like how would you explain, why that works and how it helps you to, put across what you're trying to put across?
Well, there's two things involved there. One of them is that I anyway find the funny animals a really good device to put across drama, because it tends to disarm people. It disarms their critical facility. Where if you're doing a straight story and trying to make the characters look like real people, people spend a lot of time criticizing your art.
Yeah.
And get distracted from paying attention to the story. And funny animals are ingratiating all by themselves. People tend to get involved with them. People care more about cartoon mice than they do about real people. I'm not going to worry about why that is. I think some of that just has to do with the medium that we're working in, and that funny animals are more comfortable on a piece of paper than real people are. And the second part of it is that to some extent it's a screening device.
Mm-hmm.
I think that anybody that doesn't like animals, I don't want to waste my time with it.
Good for you. Do you like
Aren't going to understand people anyway.
It's neat. I guess you guys are probably cat people. My wife asked me to ask, like, what made you decide to make the lead character a cat as opposed to any of the other animals?
There's nothing original about that. Kitty cats have been cast as sex pots for decades.
Right.
And it just seems like a natural. It just seemed like a natural. I was thinking about dancing and graceful movement and stuff, and there just isn't anything more graceful than a cat.
That's true.
Yeah, we have one who actually outvamps Omaha, so I'd say.
He's more of the Zsa Zsa type.
Yeah.
Right. Why do you think that people who are into the comic, of which obviously now there's a lot, get so attached to the characters? Do you think it's because you've made them so real and people like them for that, or?
I guess that's what we hear from people. We also, I guess, have touched a lot of times, like I said, in completely made-up situations, on things that really have happened to people, and or certainly things they can relate to in our own lives. We have a lot of couples who read the book and can relate to characters who go through good times and bad times in relationships.
I totally agree with you on that. I mean, part of the reason that we got so much into it was because me and my wife got into it together. We, a friend turned us on to the comic a couple of years ago, and we just started reading it every time it came. And now it's just like something we both like. We'll fight over who gets to read it first when it comes in. It's like something that's fun to talk about with somebody else as opposed to, I think, just reading it yourself.
Yeah, I think. I don't know, the fans that we tend to have seem to be people who are more mature. They tend to be older than your, quote, average comics fan. Of course, for one thing, they've got to be adults.
Right.
In order to see the material. But also tend to be people who've gone through relationships, who have wider life experience, and find the things that we find amusing, funny, and appalled by the things we're appalled by.
Right.
So I'd say we have a lot in common with our readers from what we've heard from them.
Well, people who are too young to read it tend to get annoyed with it. You know, like they get annoyed with the characters because they're not perfect.
Hmm. Yeah, I can see what you mean. See, that's I think what a lot, people I know find the most, poignant about it is that the characters really, they're not perfect and they do make mistakes and.
Well, and that even two people who love each other don't always get along. In fact, frequently don't. We're both veterans of previous major relationships, and we know how that one can go. And we've been together now for 6 years, and it's a struggle.
Oh, we're still beating each other up for things that our ex-spouses did to us.
Yeah, yeah. You carry it all around with you, and clearly I think our characters are carrying a lot around with them. And also showing that the relationships aren't always neat and tidy and monogamous, too.
That's true.
Much as people would like to think so.
Hey, Kate, I got a question for you. Do you think that your experience at Chrysalis has influenced the writing in Omaha any?
Maybe some. I used to be a peer counselor at the Women's Center.
Uh-huh.
And I don't really think it has that much. I think the first thing that, writing the comic did was set me apart from people that I worked with in the women's movement. I didn't feel real comfortable necessarily around people anymore who were on the Now Anti-Pornography Task Force. And we're going through the thing right now of as I said, there's a lot, there's suddenly just a ton of adult material coming out.
Right.
There's a lot of good stuff coming out, where it's always come out from San Francisco, by and large.
Got some friends up there who have formed a bogus organization called Pornographers Against Pornography. Slogan is if we can't stop us, who will?
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. That brings up something else I was going to ask. Something else that I thought was a big issue would be, you've dwelt on it a little bit, but seeing that you are obviously interested in feminism, but yet there's also, that whole issue, like you just said, about where some feminists, believe that any depiction of sexual activity is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, I don't know, I guess this is a really broad question, but how do you feel about that? I mean, does it provide something, does it confuse you or,
Well, like I said, when I first thought about writing the book, I considered not putting my name on it. I considered doing it under a pseudonym because I was very ambivalent as to how I felt about it, even though, I'd been reading Omaha since it came out. And that I found myself a lot in opposition to people who thought that any depiction of nudity or sex was inherently wrong. And now even more so. I was about to say what irritates me so much is getting lumped in, because we have adults on the cover, getting lumped in with people who are mistaking freedom for license and who are in fact eroticizing violence and sex and violence stuff that I disapprove of very strongly.
Mm-hmm.
When we've shown depictions of violence in our comics, it's always been clear that it's violence and that it's not fun. Whereas these people seem to think that violence in itself is entertaining. I think our whole culture is so screwed up in that regard that anymore I feel, I'm starting to feel really righteous about what I'm doing by comparison. I also think that it's a long-standing impression, and certainly in a lot of cases it's true, that feminists are against all depictions of sex, and I think that that's really doing a disservice to feminists and feminism. And there's a lot of good feminist erotica coming out.
Mm-hmm.
if people had their way and all depictions of sex and all discussion of sex were banned, it would almost certainly be the first to go. Just like we're always the first to be busted.
Right.
Even though they're, like I said, very little that's more explicit. I think what keeps getting Omaha in trouble is how matter-of-fact we are about it.
Yeah, it's clear that it's not fantasy or make-believe.
It's not fantasy, and it's not a big deal. That it's something that people do. Our people spend more time in restaurants than in bed, but we consider both of these things equally natural behavior.
Right. Well, have you gotten any specific criticism from any feminists for it? I mean, have you?
No, not really.
No?
Not that I know of. No, in fact, the people I think of, certainly in the comic field, as the most passionate feminists. For instance, Trina Robbins has long been a big advocate of Omaha.
Oh, that's good.
She's always liked the book a lot, and has written thusly. Outside the comics field, I don't think there's that much awareness of it. I know I heard of a comic book store being picketed by feminists who were against some of the adult material, and the female store co-owner coming out and chewing them out, saying essentially if you'd read Omaha, you couldn't possibly see this as pornography, and you'd know that this wasn't degrading to women, and essentially shamed them into leaving. Telling them, wait a minute, you've got to get your focus straight.
Right.
And I think the whole problem with the anti-pornography movement is, like the problem with most movements, is to a degree that issues get seen in stark black and white with absolutely no grays in between, and that there's no place for discussion of fine points. There's a lot of stuff that disgusts me, and I've been speaking out against it all year. There's some really loathsome stuff coming out that I would just like to see not coming out, and I would like to discourage people from reading because I think it's bad. I also think, by and large, it's all awful writing, and it's generally quite bad art.
Right.
We are advocating fun sex and unpleasant violence rather than the other way around.
I see. Do you find, on continuing this, I noticed that I think Omaha appeals to more, women, not that it's more women than men, but as opposed to other comic books. It appeals to more women because, most of the times you go into a comic book store, most of the people buying your average comics are teenage boys, basically. Whereas, I think Omaha appeals, like you said, to a more mature audience, but also to more women than normal for a comic book.
Yeah, we've really found that we've really crossed all lines, racial, affectional preference, and gender lines, all of them. I mean, we get mail from just all kinds of people and all ages of people. Which, when we started out, the presumption was, in fact, discussing one issue with our publisher, he was taking the stand that our primary audience always would be male, and I don't think that's true. And I think the more women that see it, I have yet to run into a woman who was shown it and went ick and ran away. More often they become, they get into the story and they get interested. They want to know what's happened before, and they want to know what's going to happen next.
Right.
I think it's a form of storytelling that appeals to women, not necessarily more than men, but more than most comic books style of storytelling.
What about your portrayal of bisexuality and homosexuality, which I find really refreshing because you don't find many comics that portray that realistically either. Either it's not portrayed at all, or it's portrayed in a very, exaggerated, weird manner.
It's very natural. I got a letter once from Howard Cruz thanking me for our very naturalistic portrayal of homosexuality, and I had to write back, well, Howard, you see, it's not enlightened self-interest. I'm bisexual.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, it does seem that natural and that normal, and a great many of our friends are gay or bi or all kinds of things, you know. So I guess it just doesn't strike me as something either exotic or, you know, I don't think either one of us have anything lurking in the back of our minds at all that says it's weird.
Mm-hmm. I think that's something.
I'm really I was pleasantly surprised, and I still am, at how much support we have and how many readers we have in the gay community. And it's not like we've gone out of our way, you know, to court gay readers and stuff. We haven't really gone out of our way to, you know, to do anything in particular. But yeah, you know, we bring gay characters in, and it's just, they're just, you know, it's just more characters.
Mm-hmm.
Don't do anything particularly strange with them.
You know, when we had our first male homosexual sex scene, like I said, the presumption was to a degree, and we were wondering if we were taking a chance and would turn off some of our straight male readers, especially younger ones. And in fact, the thing was, by the time that issue came up with that character, people had already gotten to know the character. They were just glad to see him happy, you know.
Right.
They were already so fond of Rob that this was just a natural part of his life. And that actually we got a lot of letters from, like I said, young straight males saying, "Gosh, you know, this really bothered me at first until I thought about it and thought, why should this bother me?"
Yeah.
Somebody wrote in saying something like, "Well, I don't really, I don't really know any gay people myself, but this certainly does make me feel like less nervous about it." And, you know, and we about wanted to write back and say, "Well, how do you know?
Yeah.
You don't know anybody."
Yeah, that's true. I think, you know, it's interesting too that, you know, there's a lot more people out there who are bisexual as well, who, like, you know, people don't think they are, and reading in Omaha, it just seems, you know, it really reflects the way people really are as opposed to what people think they are.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've certainly known a lot of guys over the years who, you know, ping pong back and forth. Okay, this year I'm straight, this year I'm gay. I never did that, so I can't. That I have a little trouble relating to. Although I've seen enough of it that I think Omaha may be doing that to some degree. Although I think she'll, you know, she's primarily heterosexual. I think she's going through the whole thing of gosh, I like this. What's wrong with me?
Mm.
That she's had in her experiences. But I think the experience is certainly a lot more common than people realize, or are willing to accept. And I think it's a great deal more natural. Like I said, the one thing is, of course, then everybody thinks you're a pervert. You know, the gays come at you for not being committed enough or fooling yourself, and the straights are just horrified. So it's, you know, it is an uncomfortable position to be at in this society. But you know, I've never been all that comfortable in this society, so it's not that much different than a lot of other things.
Right. Well, I want to return to something related to that. But there was one question I was dying to ask. I like Omaha so much that, you know, I can't see, I guess it's stupid, but I can't see how anybody could criticize it because I don't see anything wrong. You know, I like it so much.
Mm-hmm.
So when I do see any criticism of it, I'm just very curious, like what people would find to be critical about it. So I was wondering what you thought about, you know, some people, you know, the few people I have met who don't like it, you know, seem to say, oh, it's, you know, too cutesy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't understand that, but I was wondering if you'd gotten any of that and what, you know, how you thought about, you know, like that guy who wrote in that stupid, you know, that jerk who wrote in that letter that you printed in the letter column, I think 2 issues ago, you know, made the parody.
Yep.
Like, what do you think about...
The Weekly quoted him, too, which I found just hysterical. I mean, we printed that because it was the only letter of its kind we've ever gotten. Clearly, one of the things that, you know, like I said, especially since he sent along his little parody strips, was clearly, when I could look at those with a cool head, which took about 6 months, I went, boy, handicapped people make you uncomfortable, don't they?
Mm.
Clearly this was a real, his discomfort at dealing with anyone handicapped didn't leave any space for there being any right way to deal with that. Like I said, I'd be curious. Some of the people who think it's cute probably are getting put off by the funny animal aspect that works differently on other people.
Mm-hmm.
I think some people are just put off by the fact that it is funny animals. And, like I was saying earlier, that is kind of deliberate. That is kind of a screening device. I mean, we can't hope to reach everybody. And
Well, do you think that
it's a litmus test for whether somebody is going to be ready to understand what's going on or not.
Do you think too that maybe some people, are kind of jaded maybe, and they don't like you said something in there that I really liked. You said something about how why do some people have to concentrate on only the dark side of life, and maybe that's why some people might think it's cutesy because it's all it's not like just this negativity which has its place, but what you're doing is more balanced. It's more like real life, which has negative and positive, and maybe they just don't like to see any positive.
Yeah, geez, I mean, I would say in a lot of ways life's been kind of rough on our characters. The first time somebody said something about, gee, life isn't that good, I went, wait a minute, I feel like I've been, dragging my characters through all these horrendous things lately. It's just that they have good days too, and I think there is that. I think well, in comics, certainly right now, I mean, I feel like comics is about caught up to where literature was in the 20s. They've made it all the way up to nihilism. In novels too, that can get criticized. John Irving dark and to the point of being gruesome at times, to the point of being macabre. And at the same time, there is still light. There's still bright moments, and there's still joy present. And I think that's the way real life is. In fact, the grimmer a lot of aspects of real life are, the more you notice, or maybe you don't. I don't know. The more you can appreciate good moments.
Right. I also had read once that someone had done a parody of Omaha called Wichita or something like that. I've never seen it, but I was...
Crumb.
Oh, was it a positive one or a negative one? Or I mean, I don't know anything about it, so I was just curious.
We're going to stay out on that one.
For many years. As far as it's one of the very... As far as I know, it's the only parody of a current book that Crumb has ever done.
Mm-hmm.
And it was kind of a shocker because this is kind of the father of us all who were doing any kind of adult material. We're much more linear descendants of the undergrounders than a lot of the people who are doing stuff today.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel very flattered that a great many of them seem to treat us as their own, as of them. But the book has always bugged Crumb.
Really?
It's always driven him bananas, as from what we've heard.
It's bourgeois.
It's bourgeois.
Oh.
It's too middle class for him, and I'm not sure that I disagree. It is certainly, here you're talking about someone whose work was always right on the edge, who always pushed the limits all the time. And no, we're not doing that. That's certainly true. On the other hand, the parody itself, I was quite surprised by it on reflection at the time. Like I said, it was kind of a shock to the system.
Mm-hmm.
But that he never delivered what I would have been considered a devastating blow in the parody. It seemed like he would build right up to it, and then not quite hit with the killer punch that I felt he could have. I thought he targeted the weak spots in the book very well.
Mm-hmm.
But a couple of people who do know Crumb have offered us interpretations of this, that they think that there is a degree to which, we're doing things that are so different, that there is a degree of not envy, but just that if his head was built the way ours was, that he sometimes may wish that it were. We have certainly, I think, a brighter outlook on life than he does.
Right.
And why, I don't know. What keeps us optimistic, I can't imagine. We're
Well, one thing
right.
one thing that I don't know may have something to do with that brings me back. I was going to ask that before when you said something about how you didn't feel comfortable in this world or whatever. But do you think living where you do has anything to do with it? Because I get such a sense reading your stuff of Maple City, Minneapolis. It seems like such. You almost are like giving like a plug for the city because it's like it's so different. The world that Omaha lives in is very different than if you were living in L.A. or New York or something. And I mean, it kind of makes you want to go. I mean, me and my wife have talked 100 times about, hey, you want to move to Minneapolis? It just sounds so much more of it, the kind of place that you could be freer and it just sounds better. But I mean, does that have any kind of influence on it?
I'm sure it does. I moved here 12 years ago, and I still just love it. It's still it has the big city amenities without nearly so much of the big city problems.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we're about 20 years behind on big city problems. Our inner city isn't dead. In fact, it's quite lively. We live in town, and it's as comfortable, or nearly, as if we lived in a much smaller city or a much smaller town.
It depends on who you are.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there are pluses and minuses. On the one hand, it's clean, it's peaceful,
right,
and it's very pleasant, and there's a good cultural life, and it's a very it's a very pleasant place to live. On the other hand, it is it's nice.
Yeah.
And it's repressive, and it's conformist.
in what way?
Although it's conformist enough that you can find a good deal of breaking out of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a major university town, that helps.
I see.
It's got a major music scene and a major art scene. So that makes a lot of difference. But it's got trees and grass, more trees and grass than it has concrete. And I think that does make a lot of difference. So yeah, that probably brightens our outlook some. It's a lousy town to be poor in, but what city isn't?
Hmm.
So like I say, I don't know where the optimism comes from. Sometimes I think I'm not really all that bright. When I'm going, wait a minute, how can I possibly be feeling bright and cheery?
Well, I think Omaha, the things that you write about just reaffirm the human condition. Just even if it's something not great happening to a character, you just somehow are, seeing somebody else go through something. It's like the old thing. It makes you feel better, and I think even when there's like a bad moment in the strip, it still isn't a negative.
Right. Well, and our characters survive.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I'm proudest of, it was kind of my first task in coming on as the writer of the book, is that when Shelley was brought back, I mean, we'd never actually had a doctor declare her dead, so I didn't feel like I was really cheating that much. But she didn't come back just fine.
Right.
The way it so often happens in comic books and TV shows, and the way it never does in real life, or virtually never. And I've heard from a number of wheelchair-bound readers that we have. We have a number of regular readers who are handicapped in various ways. That we do that well, and makes me feel very good about what we're doing. And especially that we show that she still has a sex life.
Right.
We've got a lot of points for her.
And a temper.
And a temper.
Yeah.
That she's not sweetness and light, far from it. She never was. Why should she be now?
Going on to a different subject, you mentioned about the Minneapolis music scene. You know, a lot of people here have a good, like kind of impression of that because of the replacements and Soul Asylum and Prince and all that stuff. But how does I notice you have a lot of music references in the work, between The Herd and things like that, and your own. I have the Omaha album too, and I was just, I figured that would be a good subject to get into since we cover a lot of music in our magazine. Like, how does music influence your two's work?
I'm sorry, I was being deafened in here by somebody's music next door. No, I got it. Well, Reed, you wanna?
Well, I think some of the basic ambiance of the book, and the way the characters live and stuff, does owe something to to me coming out of rock and roll in the first place, and knowing about the way the musicians live,
Right.
that they live in a world full of nightclubs and less than respectable places and irregular hours. Not even so much the music itself as the kind of world that produces music and that produces art. And
I see.
It was a lot easier. It was very easy to understand about the life of strippers or even the life of cartoonists, because they've all got something in common.
Well, you both of you are musicians, correct? How long have you been playing?
I've been in rock and roll since on and off, largely off, but on and off since about 1965.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't take up playing until I was in my late teens, so I was always involved in vocal music. I came out of a folk background.
I see.
Which we still have that's one of the things is it's not known as much here as it used to be, but this also used to be a major league folk music center as well, which, people know about a lot of the national acts, but they don't realize how powerful and influenced folk music was, and still is. We just lost, a lot of our major venues for it. But that's giving folk a broad definition, too. We tend to define it as music made by folks.
Right.
which is pretty broad.
Yeah.
But yeah, most of our friends are musicians and or writers and or artists and or all such. So we're of course drawing from the ambiance of a lot of people who don't keep regular hours. As Reed said, I think there's a lot of that influence in it, certainly. One of the most fun things was back when we had our band up and running, that we used to play a club that was a strip club. It's just the girls knocked off early on Friday and Saturday for the live music, and that was kind of fun to have those overlapping that way.
I was kind of confused because I was trying to follow your career through the letters column. I know you first was the Lab Rats and then Compass, and then on that album it was the Shakers. Are you still doing that, or?
Yeah, I think Compass lasted about 15 minutes.
Really?
Yeah, that band broke up in just no space at all. The Shakers was the last incarnation. Now we're going on to God knows what, and we're hoping to. We've been asked to and are trying to get things together to play at the next San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, that would be very cool.
And in fact, we may take that opportunity to get back together with some of the people that Reed has played with since forever. People that you played with, good heavens, 15 years ago?
Yeah. Yeah.
Longer than that.
Yeah, more like 18 years ago, reviving the Mother Goose Band.
Uh-huh. So you don't have a current band that you're playing with at the moment, just...
No, my wrist and my left arm got really wrecked in an accident. And like I said, I wasn't getting any physical therapy until a few months ago. So
that was the end of the Shakers.
yeah, yeah, that's what did that, because I just couldn't play. I couldn't hold a guitar, in fact, anymore. And so that kind of went.
Were you happy with the way the album came out?
I haven't listened to it in a long time. Yes and no. There's some real good things on it. There are things I'd redo if I had the chance. But we cut a tune that I now kind of regret that we cut. You know, that sort of thing. But I think overall, certainly at the time, like I said, that was like the week after the car accident. So
Right.
you know, my memories of the recording sessions are real hazy. I was in a wrist brace. I couldn't play, to speak of at all.
What kind of things do you listen to? The album seemed to me to have somewhat of a bluesy feel. Is that something you like, or like what kind of records do you guys play?
Well, let's see. What do we listen to? We listen to blues. We listen to all. We listen to a lot of songwriters. We listen to vintage acid rock.
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
And vintage folk rock.
Which, you know, they're kind of indistinguishable from each other.
Right. Any particular favorites?
Gosh, Steve Goodman's right up there. Speaking of people out of the folk.
Right.
Of songwriters, Steve Goodman, Greg Brown. Good heavens, who all? Local friends of ours whose work appeared on the album, for that matter. Howard Ashby Krantz and Nate Buckland.
These guys are both great geniuses, and eventually they're going to be so rich that we can't afford to do their tunes.
They wrote, I was going to say, I remember those names. They wrote some songs on the album.
Yeah, very, very fine songwriters. On vintage stuff, I'd say Buffalo Springfield and David Crosby end up on the turntable as often as anything.
I noticed a bit of that on the album. It kind of reminded me some of. I was saying to myself, it sounded a little bit like Neil Young. I thought.
There's a little Birds influence in a little Neil Young.
Yeah, Birds, and you know, that's kind of where we're coming out of. That particular gang. Stephen's still the finest songwriter.
All that
money.
All that
Yeah.
Hippie cowboy stuff.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. I think that's kind of making a resurgence now. I think people are rediscovering some of it again, which is nice. But do you have any? I didn't ask Reed what his influences in terms of art was, but before I do that, like, what influences do both of you have that aren't necessarily related to comics or art, but necessarily find their way into influencing what you do in terms of your art? I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. It's just I'm sitting here going, damn, I keep saying I'm going to make up a pat answer for that one. Gosh, I don't know. We read everything. We're old science fiction fans, so some of the best of that.
Really, what kind of authors do you like?
Some of the authors I like are people who, a lot of folks' eyes are more obscure. People who do really character-driven novels in any field, actually, in science fiction or mysteries or whatever. Edgar Pangborn leaps into my mind,
Mm-hmm.
who is not especially well known, but perhaps should have been more so.
John Varley.
Ida Robinson.
Phil Dick.
Phil Dick. We've been reading a lot of Phil Dick lately.
Great for
great.
crazy people.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned before John Irving, because I'm a big John Irving fan, and there's one of his novels, I don't know if you ever read it, that reminds me sometimes of, Omaha reminds me of it sometimes. It's called the
158-Pound Marriage.
Yeah, that one and The Water Method Man are both, I don't know, they just have certain themes in common with Omaha.
Well, also, I've always thought that they were all warm-ups for The World According to Garp. which, like I said, is really an extremely dark book.
Yeah.
With nonetheless a great deal of life force to it.
You'd like to maybe creep a little more Tom Robbins into the comic.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that may be a whole different comic. I'd like to. It's like sometimes I think about things I'd like to do and realize that Omaha has, to a degree, not gotten stodgy, but it's gotten a definition. And some of the weirder things I want to do, I'm just going to have to find another place to do them.
Do you ever see yourselves ending Omaha and doing another strip, or do you see yourselves keeping Omaha and doing other things?
Oh yeah. Well, we've already done other things. I mean, I have another gig right now, and we've got other projects in the works. I have some more straight realism, a couple of straight realism graphic novels that I want to do, and we've got the occasional crossover project and short story that we do in other books.
I remember seeing something about this thing called Speaking Stone.
Which was a straight funny animal story. It was a straight old-fashioned adventure. It's about a mouse archaeologist.
And his long-suffering
assistant. And that was just, pure straight funny animal romp, and we're eventually supposed to, we were starting to work on a 4-part story to be serialized in Fantagraphics Critters. And we'd gotten the first part out when the car accident happened. And so someday we'll finish that, and that'll come out as a separate book through Fantagraphics. And that was a lot of fun to do. That was a whole different sort of thing. And, now I'm working for Disney as well.
Really?
Yeah, I'm writing Roger Rabbit comics for Disney.
Oh, that should be fun.
Which is a nice change of pace, too.
But you guys aren't tired of Omaha yet?
No, I can't imagine ever getting tired of it.
Well, that's good to know. That reassures me.
Yeah, no, it'll go on as long as it's continuing to sell, and we're still both more or less vertical.
Well, speaking of that, were you surprised? Either or both of you surprised at how successful Omaha has been relatively?
I don't know, Reed. Are you surprised? It's all your fault.
I certainly was initially. We've been doing it for a while before we got out in public. Before we got out in public at all, and it was like a case of back in what was it, 1985. It made me forced us to go to a comic book convention, and I'm going, what are we going to do there, and we get there and there's fans, that have been waiting to see us, and it was a total surprise. And we went the first time in, I think it was in 1986?
That was 86.
Yeah. And we were mobbed at the kitchen sink booth, and I was totally, I was amazed that somebody read this thing. Now of course we get financial statements, and we know what our circulation is. We know how many people are buying it. But I'm still surprised when I go to big comic conventions and see people wearing T-shirts that I drew. And I never quite get tired of that.
That's good. I noticed another angle that I think is great. You mentioned the T-shirts. Is like the whole merchandising angle. Do you want to continue to expand that, or?
Well, it kind of is expanded on its own. I mean, we've been doing things basically as there's been a demand for them. Avalon Editions put out an art print last year that sold just phenomenally well. We couldn't believe it. A black and white print. We're talking about doing a series of color prints for them.
Wow.
Of serigraphs. And it just, people approach us about licensing. We know we've made the big time now. We're going to be rubber stamps. We just signed the contract and did the work for a batch of rubber stamps through Allison once in Rubberland. and it's nice. It helps us make a living, and yeah, like Reese said, it's a tremendous boost of seeing people wearing Omaha shirts. It just always tickles me.
On this kind of scale, I mean, when you're talking about hundreds of thousands of something, that's something else. But on the kind of scale that we do it, I mean, we don't really make a heck of a lot of money off merchandising.
Mm.
But it's just it's a lot of fun to have T-shirts and statuettes and posters and stuff like that, and you can pretend like you're big and famous.
Well, as like a taking that to a further limit, one thing I just thought of this morning that I just thought at the last minute, gosh, I should ask them this. Would you ever, and now that you mentioned the thing about doing the Roger Rabbit comics, it even makes me think of this more. What would you think if somebody one day asked you to do like an animated Omaha film or something, like kind of like Fritz the Cat or something? I mean,
right. I'd say I'd say good luck. People have been asking about that more and more, which gives me to wonder if they know something I don't. It's something that could conceivably happen if somebody was really dedicated to doing it right and could afford it. I mean, animated films cost the earth to produce, and certainly in our case, in as repressive as the society is right now, I can't imagine somebody wanting to do a major film with it. But I could be surprised. I'd love to be surprised. I'd love to see it done right.
Yeah, I mean, it could be wonderful if it was done with the right intentions.
Yeah, that's mostly what it would take. That somebody had that money, well, sure, I'd love to see it. Reed, how do you feel about it?
Well, I'd love to see a good film done. That's as far as my imagination goes. I mean, I can't envision anywhere that anybody would go with a film, where they place it, or who they, what they do with it.
Mm.
That's something that I just try not to think of because I'm not any good at that.
Yeah. Well, maybe it's just like Dennis says, that's not your job.
Yeah. If it's not my problem, if somebody else is worrying about it, well, I'm certainly ready to be pleasantly surprised.
Right. Well, it's good that you have somebody like that you work with who you can respect. I mean, I think most people pretty much respect him.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
Do you still own your characters' licenses, or?
Yes.
Yeah,
we hold control over our licensing. Dennis does most of the agenting of it for us. But we do in fact control licensing and have quality control rights on it and everything, which is an unusual clause to have. But we're finicky.
Yeah.
I guess is the word.
It's good that you are, though.
Surprising, I guess, for a couple of cat people. But by and large, certainly everything that's been done, well, either we've done the work for, or we've been, knocked off our feet by what we've seen, of whoever's doing it.
Mm.
The statuette, that Steve Kaiwis did, sculpted, was just beautiful. And we had the opportunity, since he's Minneapolis-based, to see it and make suggestions for changes and improvements as we saw fit. So it's nice to have that kind of control, and to feel that kind of freedom. It also lets us, like when we're invited to do a crossover, it allows us to do so without having to get permission to use our own characters.
Right.
That's usually had the more of a positive thing of possibly bringing new people to seeing our work. We're going to be doing a Munden's Bar episode with Omaha.
Really?
In Grimjack. John Ostrander asked us, a long, long time ago to do that, so that'll be fun.
I guess I kind of neglected some of the basic questions, so before I forget, what are some of your influences for art, in terms of comic artists and stuff like that? So I talked about other ones, but I mean, just for the basic box of it, like, is there anybody in particular that influenced you?
Well, well, let's see. Well, Crumb, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and outside of Crumb, and it's a long ways back to the largely anonymous people that cranked out funny animal comics in the late '40s, and some influence, I think, from the Archie comics of the '50s and early '60s.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of it is not really owed directly to anybody in particular, but more to like Disney animation and Art Nouveau,
Right.
and strip cartoonists like B.T. Hamlin, Al Yoop, and Roy Crane, and Elsie Seeger.
Was there anybody when you first started drawing Omaha? Was there anybody in particular you modeled her after? Like, is there any kind of anatomical model that you went for, like, to portray her as? Or?
No, I just generally I knew what I wanted, to the extent that I wanted a glamorous, Titian-haired kitty cat stripper.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember cramming fashion magazines and hair magazines and stuff like that, and trying to come up with my my own design, going straight from real women, and trying to interpolate a cat from the real thing, rather than imitating other cartoonists.
I see. Do you also, something I noticed was there's a big difference in the renderings between, like, the very early strips and the ones from the last 3 or 4 years. Was there, like, it seemed especially when Kate started writing the stuff, the art I don't know, just got a lot, not just better, but it just you just started doing, you did it a totally different way, I guess, in the very beginning. Was that like something conscious you did, like to you make it a little bit more realistic looking, or?
Well, I think a lot of it is, it did get better. I got better. I had a lot to learn. I still do. I'm still working really hard to try to get it better.
Well, you've changed materials as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't use the same tools at all.
Mm.
That's when I started off, and a lot of that is just simply a switch over from being a writer artist to being an artist and following somebody else's writing. When you're doing the writing, then it's natural to tailor stuff for yourself as an artist.
Mm-hmm. Well, how do both of you find it working with you?
About the work at all.
No.
Just do it. We used to try talking about it, and that didn't work very well. Also, Reed gave up the writing so thoroughly. At first I just thought he was being gracious, and then I realized, that perhaps he was off giggling to himself, and having gotten out from under it. I'm a great deal freer than I used to be now. Instead of having to suffer through all the writing, I can just sit at my drawing table and do my job and bitch about somebody else's work. So we both do that to a degree. It's very, very hard. living together and working together is extremely hard, and I guess we're kind of getting better at it. Not not that it happened real consciously. I think we just got tired of fighting. But it's a very volatile relationship anyway.
And it's a very personal book.
Yeah, that's true.
That may make it easier than if we were working on something else.
Do you have the stories planned like really far in advance? Like, do you know what's going to happen? Way in advance, or do you just kind of do it?
He laughs like he knows. Yes, actually, I have a lot of ideas. As to what's going to happen. I just don't know. I don't always know exactly in what book it's going to happen, because what I frequently found is that I have an idea that's developing, and it takes less time or usually a lot more time to develop it properly than I thought it would initially.
I see.
No, I know a lot of the things that are going to come up. And that's why I said, why when people ask if it's going to go on, I say, well, yeah, of course, I've got these stories that's going to take years to get all of this out, run-ins with all kinds of things, and we've got so many lines in the water right now as far as plot. Subplots going, and just taking up the slack on them will take, take at least a year. So it's once an idea starts as a subplot, there's just no telling how far that can go. Just like real life.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned that. This might come off like a kind of dumb question, but it's something that I've thought of a couple of times. Is the strip taking place in the present, or are you like relating it? Is it like something that happened in the past, or is it really not like anything at all in terms of time?
Well, I think, and certainly the slower we've been about the book, the more it's happening in the past. I don't know. I guess we see it more as kind of set in about the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah, that's about where it kind of sticks.
Yeah, it's kind of a composite time. It's kind of a composite of 2 or 3 decades worth of time.
Yeah, because some things I notice about it seem very, just the way the characters look and stuff like that seems very late 70s at times. And that's why I was wondering. But then other times it seems like it's right now. So
well, certainly when the characters were developed was in the late 70s, and so there is that. To a degree, we're stuck with that. And at the same time, that's why when people say, "Well, gee, you should deal more with AIDS and so forth." Well, first of all, we're not an educational comic. Second place,
not in that sense, anyway.
Yeah. Second place, to a degree, in my head, this is all taking place before any of us knew what was coming. And back possibly before we were all, thinking about this.
Right.
And I think to a degree it's not stuck in time, but it's kind of beyond time. Like I said, it almost seems like it's a composite from the late 60s on through the 80s, which, spans my lifetime, or my conscious lifetime, and so to agree, how it is in your head, it's all, there's a degree to which time doesn't change mind unless the world is slapping you in the face with it. But when you think of things taking place outside of current events, you tend to think of them in this kind of composite of all of your experience. So I think that's where it's coming from. It's coming from, there's probably some formulation you add, read to my ages together and divide, and there's probably some kind of formula for it, but I don't know what it is. No, I don't think that was a dumb question, because it occurs to me every so often.
How old are the characters supposed to be, or are they kind of ageless?
Well, no. Now that's more specific. they're not as old as people tend to assume they are. Sometimes readers get impatient with them until they explain, wait a minute, they're probably in their early 20s. Omaha is in her fairly early 20s. Chuck maybe is mid-20s. So, you know, a lot of what we're seeing is the kind of behavior you get out of people in their early to mid-20s rather than in their 30s and 40s.
Right. Yeah, I was curious about that because sometimes it did seem to me like they were 20, and then other times I thought, well, maybe they were like, you know, in their early 30s or something.
Yeah, I think they're really precocious people in their 20s. Most of them.
It's the reader's problem there, and to some extent too, because just like with most people, there are ways in which they're wise beyond their years, and there are ways in which they're really dense.
Yeah, that's true. Oh, one other thing with that, you know, an issue that a lot of times it brings up, and I've only seen it mentioned a couple of times in the letters column, but it's something I think pretty important. As you're dealing with like what you call like a sex professional, like how do you view that whole thing? Because your view of it is, I think, very eye-opening for a lot of people who like assume that people are like that or different, and you know, a lot of times you have Omaha explaining what that these people aren't the way that society thinks they are or whatever. I mean, how do you view that?
Well, certainly, you know, in Joanne's case, in some cases, in some ways, you know, she certainly probably has the sort of common history that you frequently find with women who go into prostitution.
Mm-hmm.
I think the whole thing there is first off, you know, of what may be eye-opening about it is that we don't approve, or rather we don't disapprove.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't make presumptions that there's anything wrong with these people. You know, that they aren't either morally bankrupt or sick.
Well, yeah, just the fact that your main character, you know, is a stripper, I think people takes them by surprise. Like they get so involved in the character, and then before they know it, they realize that this is what she is.
I think this comes from music too, because like when I grew up, it was still very much it was the early '60s, and it was still very much a matter of people wondering what sort of twisted home life I must have had, and what sort of strange compulsion, what sort of terrible traumas must I have gone through that it made me such an alienated misfit that I'd grow my hair long and play rock and roll music.
Right.
And it's just another thing to do. You know, well, maybe I am twisted, but that really isn't the point. You know, the point is that it's an option.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think with most of the you know, quote, sex professions, I don't think that they are, any of them, degrading in themselves. I think the working conditions are frequently very, very bad. And I would like to see that change. I would like to see a sane enough attitude, you know, arise in this country that, you know, prostitution would be legalized and brought under OSHA, rather than I think if you keep telling someone they're a criminal, of course that's degrading.
Right.
But I don't think that the work behavior in itself is inherently degrading. I felt a lot more degraded when I felt I was prostituting myself when I sold my body and my mind 8 hours a day for rotten money, and you know, in offices that were extremely sexist, either in behavior or in that were actually discriminatory.
The Midwest Carton Company.
Yeah, is actually based on a place I worked at, where the sales manager had 2 DeLoreans, and the women who really, and there were of course no women in the sales force, and all the women were working minimum wage, and they of course were the ones keeping the company going. And the thing about not being allowed to leave during lunch was in fact true.
Oh, like in the last.
Yeah, like in the last Omaha. That was based on only the retailers. You know, the retailers are the ones on the front lines. we're constantly, I think more consistently than any other book, our book has gotten in trouble. Like I say, it's a surprise. Now it's starting to make me angry because of, like I said, the extreme violence that is permissible, and our rather sweet and mild, sexual activity is considered taboo. There's currently a case outstanding in New Zealand. We're also not being imported into Britain again because we're getting confiscated at customs all the time. And it's very frustrating sometimes. Every time a case has come to trial, they've looked at our book and said, well, no, this has merit. Every time it's, we've been vindicated. Not all the books in every book have been, but we always have been. But it doesn't stop it doesn't stop it happening over and over again. Like I said, people became very concerned after Friendly Franks that we would start censoring the book, or our publisher would, or
we haven't got that much sense.
Yeah, no. If anything, quite the opposite. It's purely a matter of, the amount of sex came down in the book, both when the plot got too complicated and also having a serious back injury can really fill up your sex life for a while, and I wasn't much inclined to think about it when I couldn't do anything about it. But it's mostly been simply when the plot got too complicated, just like real life.
Exactly. I remember you said something about that to that girl who wrote in, saying, where's the hot sex or something, and you explain, well, this is real life. I thought that was that was great.
Another book. Not that there's anything wrong with hot sex, and we promoted some things that have it. There are some wonderful things being done if you're looking for fantasy.
But that's never been our purview.
Mm-hmm.
We're almost documentary-like at times. What we're doing is sex is included because because it's there, because it's natural,
right,
and healthy. To use a word that'll really get people disgusted with it.
But it's just the way it really is. But we try to do it the way it really is. It's not always good. It's not always exciting. It's not always rewarding.
Mm.
Even if it's with people who love each other, it isn't always great. That's the way it is in real life. And so I don't think we really make it as we don't really make it as for prurient interest.
Right.
There's too many words for one thing.
Well, like you said, that is real life. I think that's why people like it. One last thing that I was going to ask. You had said something about, I think I read it somewhere in one of the books, about the characters possibly eventually moving out into a bigger world, because mostly they've centered in Minneapolis and to a lesser degree San Francisco. Do you see the characters eventually staying with the basic locale that you've set up for them, or could they go into something totally different?
Well, I think this is always going to be home base.
And is Maple City a real nickname for Minneapolis, or is it something you guys came up with?
If you ever fly here, look at your luggage tag, because Mipple Stipple is how it looks on a luggage tag, MPL. STPL frequently. And Mipple Stipple is how people around here refer to it frequently.
I see, okay. Sorry for interrupting you.
Yeah. So, Trina Robbins flew in here the first time. She said, I never knew where Mipple City came from before, and then I looked at my baggage tag. Yeah, that's where it comes from. Is people, sometimes refer to the Twin Cities as Mipple Stipple. For God knows what stupid reason. Yeah, it's like a lot of our friends, who have moved all over the place. This is one of those cities that people come back to, or move to from other places, or move away from, and then come back to. And
stay here and get paunchy and boring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's So, I can see, certainly if Omaha makes the big time, she probably won't, she'll probably move elsewhere, at least for a while. Although, one of the great things about working, in our field is we don't have to go anywhere. And now that we've all got computers and fax machines,
Right.
people don't have to go to the coasts anymore if they're freelancing. And or in the music business, a lot of our big names here have stayed, which was one of the reasons I admire them, because it is, it's
Affordable housing is part of that.
affordable housing is part of that. We get, there are people who we know who are contemplating moving here from New York City when we tell them what the rents are like by comparison, or from San Francisco,
Sounds better the more you speak about it.
Oh, it's just it's really pretty. It's real pretty here. It is clean, and it is you drive a half hour out and you're in the country. I mean, it's a big farm state, so it does have those aspects to it. We like it. We do have the stupidest city motto in the universe.
Really?
Yeah, we like it here. Is in fact supposed to be the city slogan.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Now you want to play sound dumb.
Actually, I Like It Here was the title of a very, very popular newspaper column that ran many, many years ago, but that doesn't make it any less stupid.
Yeah, we like it here.
Everybody can't know that.
Yeah, but like I said, I came here 12 years ago and never left.
Where are you originally from?
I'm from Southern Illinois originally. I was living in St. Louis when I moved up here with my first husband, who was another case in point. He'd been here for a weekend once and fallen in love with the place. And sure enough, we moved up here blind. It just went nuts. But like I said, low crime, decent air, things like that can be kind of.
Yeah.
In this day and age, especially, it's.
They do mean a lot.
Really, it really seems like like a small town by comparison. At the same time, we've got all the things you could, it's they don't quite roll up, they don't roll up the sidewalks at 10 o'clock. It's not that small, but it's quiet, So yeah, we're kind of fond of the place. But yeah, Minneapolis is a place that, like I said, I can see our characters always coming back here and having strong ties here.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, right now I'm running in two, possibly three different locales in the book, and it gets hard to handle. That's the only problem with it.
I can imagine.
Is getting everything in and reestablishing place.
Well, I won't take up any more of your time because I know I've talked to you for a long time, and I don't like impinging on your hospitality.
Oh,
but
all right. We're very flattered. Like I said, we've seen the magazine and we like it.
Thank you.
Real good. And we're sorry we didn't respond to your letter. We're terrible about it.
Oh, please, I understand. If it's a matter of me getting a response from my letter or you letting you guys work on the comic, I'll let you work on the comic.
No, we're just that sloppy. I mean, we both got out of the habit of writing letters years ago, and we should get back into it because more and more things are going on, but it's just really haven't gotten real prompt about things. So.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time anyway.
Oh, well, thanks.
One last thing I wanted to ask you that I think I'd asked about in the letter, but now that I got you on the phone, I'll ask about. You had an ad or a notice in the back of the last Omaha about that you were going to be selling some pieces of original art.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you do you have like a catalog?
Yeah,
or something?
we have a list. Here, I'm sitting right here with a pen and a notepad. Why don't I get your address?
Okay.
We can send you a copy of the list.
Yeah, I would appreciate that. I'd love to, we're definitely, me and my wife are like looking to buy a house and we want to decorate it. And one of the first things we said is, wouldn't it be great if we could get like an original piece of Omaha to put on the wall?
Oh yeah, well there's still plenty available. It's that turned out to be a good move. It really helped a lot financially. So what's your
Let's see. My name's Greg Fasolino. It's spelled F